This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, where did COVID come from? A theory that it began in a lab in China is gaining more attention. We're going to talk with CBN News medical reporter Lorie Johnson. Today marks the first anniversary of the murder of George Floyd as his family visits President Joe Biden at the White House. At the same time, a surge in crime has many leaders rethinking the idea of defunding the police. The Democratic Party has long been a champion of Israel, but during the recent fight with Hamas, many blasted the Jewish state. Is the party changing on its historic position? We've got the story for you. And this week, a super blood moon will appear, and some believe it has biblical significance. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. We begin this half hour with the growing questions about the coronavirus and investigations into where it came from. A just-released intelligence report reveals 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology sought treatment at a hospital in November of 2019. This on top of previously known information that several researchers showed symptoms consistent with COVID-19 at that time. The news comes as the World Health Organization today is planning its next phase of investigations into how the virus began its spread in Wuhan and throughout the world. Dr. Anthony Fauci supporting calls for an investigation, reportedly telling a panel he is not convinced the virus developed naturally. CBN News medical reporter Lorie Johnson is here now with more. So, Lorie, the World Health Organization already investigated the origins of the coronavirus. Why are they interested in another investigation now?
Well, Ephraim, it's because that first investigation was inconclusive. It's important to know that the people who did this WHO investigation were representatives from the WHO who collaborated with the Chinese Communist government. Those two forces put out this report that was hundreds of pages long, and was inconclusive. There were basically 2 theories that were presented. The hundreds of pages were almost entirely devoted to the theory that the coronavirus began from a bat transmitting it to another animal called a pangolin at a market, and that it was passed from that pangolin to human beings at a wet market. And only 4 pages, Ephraim, were devoted to the theory that it began in the lab. And the report concluded that the animal to human transmission is probably very likely, but the lab transmission theory is very unlikely. So that was the first report. Now there are renewed calls for another investigation. The big question is what's going to be different this time around?
Speaking of likely and unlikely, how likely is it that China will release critical data related to the origins?
So that's what's needed right now is actual hard data. For example, we know that these 3 researchers at the lab went to the hospital, were hospitalized all at the same time in November of 2019 for symptoms that were like the coronavirus. So here's the simple solution. The hospital certainly has blood samples from those 3 patients. And if we could go ahead and just get our hands on those blood samples, we could test them immediately to see if in fact they had the coronavirus. But the Chinese government will not release that information. They said there's nothing to see here. Those people didn't have coronavirus. And this is what we're seeing with other information from the lab. We need that hard data of what the scientists were actually researching in the lab and other health information regarding people in the lab. And so far, the Chinese government has just given us verbal testimony. Everything's fine. There was nothing to see there. And so the question that you're asking is, what can we do to pressure or force the Chinese government to turn over that critical hard data? And that's the big question.
Now, this lab leak theory has been floated around for about a year now. Why is it now gaining credibility?
Right. So a lot of people are thinking, wait, I think I've already heard this before. So what happened was President Trump was really the first to come out with it. And so naturally, this became a politicized thing. A lot of people downplayed it, perhaps because it was President Trump who said it. And then other high-ranking Republicans also echoed those claims. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton and former Secretary of State, former CIA Director Mike Pompeo. So now there are more renewed concerns on the part of bipartisan, nonpartisan people such as 18 scientists who recently wrote a letter that was published in the publication Science calling for renewed investigation, particularly focusing on the lab leak theory and other governments as well.
All right, Lorie Johnson, thank you so much for your insight. Much appreciated.
Sure.
Today marks the one-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd. He's the 46-year-old black man who died at the hands of the Minneapolis police officers, former now, which spread nationwide protests. Floyd's family, including his daughter Gianna, will meet with President Biden at the White House today. That meeting comes as Congress is still working on police reform. The governor of Minnesota has also signed a proclamation declaring a moment of silence today for 9 minutes and 29 seconds to honor George Floyd. Floyd's murder also brought a movement to defund the police, but now as communities across the country face a surge in violent crime, some leaders are rethinking their support of that idea. Over the 72-hour period this weekend, more than 130 people were killed and hundreds wounded in gun crimes. CBN's Jenna Browder brings us the story.
As the country makes its way out of the pandemic, another deadly epidemic is on the rise. Gun violence surging in communities across the country.
Screaming, hollering, calling the cops. We're calling each other.
In New Jersey over the weekend, 2 people were killed and 12 injured in a shooting at a house party. In South Carolina, a 14-year-old girl was shot and killed. 14 others were hurt at an outdoor concert. And near Santa Ana, California, a 6-year-old was gunned down in a possible road rage incident.
He was kind and he was precious. And you killed him for no reason.
In all, 12 mass shootings over a 72-hour period this weekend. 130 people killed and hundreds hurt. All a continuation of an uptick in violent crimes in 2020. 34 cities saw a 30% spike in homicides from 2019 to 2020. Aggravated assaults and gun assaults rose too. The White House says it's a gun problem.
Is there a crime problem in this country?
Well, I would say certainly there is a guns problem, and that's something the president would say. And there are communities where local violence and community violence is an issue. And that's one of the reasons that we have proposed and have now are implementing funding for community violence prevention programs across the country. There are hundreds, thousands of people who lose their lives. And that's one of the reasons the president will continue to advocate for the Senate passing universal background checks.
Others, though, blame the rise in crime on the movement to defund the police. Rabbi Abraham Cooper in L.A. says lawlessness is on the rise since the city slashed police funding.
Now, if you don't have properly trained police and fully funded police, and they're not around to deal with the behavior, you see very quickly the escalating lawlessness and violence. And that's one of the reasons why we're particularly on edge, because of what's going on today in U.S. cities.
Last year, L.A. cut $150 million from police. Now, though, it's increasing its police budget to hire 250 more officers. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill he says will punish social media platforms that remove conservative ideas from their sites. The new law will allow states to fine large social media companies if they remove the accounts of state and local candidates and let the Florida Attorney General and private citizens sue big tech companies. DeSantis says the measure will protect the abilities of Floridians to speak and express their opinions.
You know what? When they have the power to be able to silence you, you take it seriously. And so that's what we're doing here today. I think we will have more robust debate in the state of Florida as a result of the legislation that we're signing today.
The measure is likely to be challenged in court. Here's a quick look at some other stories we're following for you in the news at this hour. The FBI is investigating a suspicious package sent to the home of Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. The envelope contained white powder and had a message threatening violence against Paul. He said he takes it seriously. Former President Donald Trump will start his public rallies again with 2 in June, followed by another big event around the 4th of July. Democratic senators are warning if the Supreme Court strikes a blow against Roe v. Wade by upholding a Mississippi abortion law that would give more momentum for packing the court or changing. The Hill reports Senator Richard Blumenthal said that would lead to a seismic movement to reform the court. Coming up, the Democratic Party has supported Israel for decades, since it was founded in 1948. But some Democrats are highly critical of the Jewish state during its recent war with Hamas. We're going to take a look at that and the controversy over Facebook shutting down a page where Christians could come together to pray for Jerusalem. We've got the story for you when we come back.
Having sex before you're married is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire. Monday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Thursday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Israel today, promising to rally international support to help Gaza following the devastating war against Israel, which ended last week. Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and said, while the U.S. will help Gaza, it would also make sure that aid for reconstruction will not help Hamas. Netanyahu has faced criticism from Israelis who believes he ended the offensive too soon without dealing a heavier blow to Hamas. For decades, the Democratic Party has been a champion of Israel, but that has begun to change in recent years. Several Republican senators criticized congressional Democrats last week for a lack of support for Israel during its battle against Hamas. And some Democrats took a stand against the Jewish state. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has this story.
Lawmakers here have historically been unified in their support for Israel. Now, Republicans say they're concerned with the growth of anti-Israel rhetoric from their Democratic colleagues.
Israel's a democracy. Hamas is a terrorist group.
But not all lawmakers agree.
Well, I think the squad used to be a fringe element of the Democratic Party when it comes to Israel. Probably still are. But more and more Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Chris Murphy are openly siding with this moral equivalency argument that there's problems on both sides.
Senator Lindsey Graham tells CBN News he's shocked by the number of Democrats reluctant to firmly stand with Israel.
When the Iranians and Hamas here, Democratic members of Congress and the Senate, basically seeing no difference between Israel and Hamas, it only incentivized more violence.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell adds when it comes to Israel and Hamas, they play by very different rules.
When Israel strikes, for example, they call the building and say, please get out of the building because we're about to attack it in order to minimize civilian casualties. Hamas is lobbing rockets into Israel to kill civilians. There is no moral equivalency here.
Both senators support Israel defending itself. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who has Palestinian relatives in the West Bank, confronted President Biden over his support for Israel, reportedly sharing a message similar to her recent House speech.
As long as the message from Washington is that our military support for Israel is unconditional, Netanyahu's extremism, right-wing government will continue to expand settlements, continue to demolish homes, and continue to make the prospects for peace impossible.
Graham described Biden's Israel response as uneven and also criticized his plans to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal.
Why would you go back into a nuclear deal with the largest state sponsor of terrorism?
Pointing to Iran's role in the current attacks on Israel.
Without Iran's support for Hamas, there would be no 3,500 rockets.
Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
While Islamic groups from Gaza fired rockets into Israel, another battle took place, this time online, when Islamic groups attacked one of the largest Christian pages on Facebook. That brought millions of Christians together to pray for Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. Chris Mitchell has the story from Jerusalem.
The Jerusalem prayer team, established nearly 20 years ago with a reported nearly 77 million followers on Facebook, saw it suddenly shut down. Mike Evans tells CBN News an anti-Semitic campaign of hate targeted the Facebook page.
An organized Islamic campaign coming out of Pakistan, Indonesia, and Turkey targeted our site with over 1 million comments. So Facebook, rather than contact Bible believers and find out the truth, they responded to radical Islamic 911 would-bes and pulled us down.
The cyber campaign happened in the middle of the team's prayer time during the conflict between Hamas and Israel.
We've been praying for peace. We've been praying for God to protect Israel. We've been praying for peace in Jerusalem. We've been praying for blessing over the Jewish people, protection over the Jewish people. We've been praying for protection over Arab Israelis.
The attack campaign was twofold. First came the negative Facebook comments.
People coming from anti-Semitic groups calling for a second Holocaust, people attacking us personally, people making threats upon us personally.
Second, the hackers spread a false narrative that Facebook created the page during the conflict and then had people like the page without their consent. Dozens of videos with thousands of views across social platforms celebrated the news that the prayer team's page was down. Al Jazeera also reported on the situation.
I'm incredibly disappointed right now, basically, that instead of these anti-Semitic people who are attacking Christians for praying for peace in Jerusalem, for praying for peace, an end of the bloodshed, and instead of stopping those anti-Semitic attacks against us, Facebook has shut our page down.
The Jerusalem prayer team is appealing the decision, and Evans has enlisted the help of U.S. and Israeli leaders. CBN News reached out to Facebook, and they provided us with this statement. We removed Jerusalem prayer team's Facebook page for violating our rules against spam and inauthentic behavior.
My prayer right now is that Facebook would start to act with, hopefully, integrity on the situation and restore our prayers. You know, in this era, the fact that your prayers could be canceled on the internet is an unimaginable thing.
Evans came to Israel to report from the front lines of the conflict as part of a television special that includes many Christian leaders.
But it's to bring solidarity for the state of Israel and to oppose the lies to the evangelicals of the world.
Evans sees the special as an effort to win the media war and counter what he says is the mainstream media believing the lies of radical Islam. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, back here at home, it is called dark money, and it can have a powerful influence on politics. We'll take a look at what it is right after this. Stay with us.
region's first ROTC graduate student.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
On both sides of the political divide, American politics is being swallowed up by what is known as dark money. Shadowy sources making huge contributions influencing government policy. As Dale Hurd reports, some say it goes all the way to the White House.
It's an accusation flowing from both sides of the political aisle. Conservatives say dark money controls White House policy on issues ranging from court packing to the environment. Dark money is a political contribution with no requirement to disclose who gave it and no limit on the amount. Democrats have long warned that conservative dark money was a menace to the nation, although in the last 2 elections, Democrats were the dark money champions.
Maybe no issue has greater hypocrisy than debates over campaign finance reform and so-called dark money. Because Democrats thunder against dark money, and yet Democrats dominate dark money.
Liberal dark money groups outspent conservative groups by a 3-to-1 margin in the 2018 election and by a 5-to-1 margin in 2020. $1 billion in dark money was spent on the 2020 federal elections, mostly by Democrats, according to the website opensecrets.org from the Center for Responsive Politics. It says 2/3 of it came from shadowy political nonprofits and shell companies. Joe Biden received 5 times as much of these contributions as Donald Trump. Former Nevada Attorney General Adam Laxalt is with Americans for Public Trust.
Everything that's going on in America right now, where culture is being pushed in so many different levers, there's often a dark money group on the other side of that.
After the election, officials connected to dark money accepted positions in the Biden administration, including White House counsel Paige Herwig and spokeswoman Jen Psaki. They worked with a group called Demand Justice, which paid for this sign demanding Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer resign to make way for a Biden appointment. Demand Justice also wants to pack the court. Chief of Staff Ron Klain was a board member at the CAP Action Fund, which reports claim deals in dark money donations. And White House climate advisor Gina McCarthy led the Natural Resources Defense Council, another dark money group. Laxalt believes this effectively makes Joe Biden a puppet of dark money.
These groups made an investment. They cared about X issues. And they're not just out there still spinning. A lot of them moved into the White House, and they're helping to shape policy.
Democrats in the new Congress have vowed to end dark money. Critics say maybe they will, after they're done using it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, a special kind of lunar eclipse is coming this week called a super blood moon. We're going to tell you about that and why some ministers believe it has a biblical significance. We've got that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Please stay with us.
Yeah, buddy.
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts, in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
A lunar eclipse or blood moon is on the way, set to take place tomorrow, and it will be at least partially visible from Eastern Asia, Australia, the Pacific Ocean, and much of the Americas. It is being called a super blood moon. Forbes.com says the full moon will move into Earth's dark central umbral shadow, where it will appear as a blood moon for 15 minutes, briefly turning the lunar surface a reddish copper color. Some ministers say the large number of blood moon eclipses in recent years is one of the many signs of the end of times. To find out more about that and where the blood moon will be visible, simply visit cbnnews.com. It's time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and here's a message I pray will bless your day, and you will post, tag, tweet, and share it with others. Get out of your comfort zone. Change does not come in comfort. It comes in times of challenge. It is time to get uncomfortable. And the bottom line here is this: it is time to change. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. In fact, you can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Make it a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow.